Enchanté.
I'm quite enjoying that soundtrack. I hope that's getting everyone in the mood for our next session. Hello to everyone who has just joined us, and welcome back to everyone else who's been joining us throughout the course of the day. Welcome to the Future of Cars Summit. Now, this is an exciting session. I hope we're going to get into a good discussion. It's all about, is this the end of the love affair of cars? Well, I really hope the answer to that is no, but I assure you this is something that is very much a concern of mine, particularly with a young son at the moment. I really hope the love affair is not over. Now, just a reminder to anyone who has just joined, we have a chat function. So if you do want to make a point, then we would absolutely love to hear from you. So do use that. Also, if you actually want to get involved in the discussion, you just need to raise your hand and we will come to you and you can join in. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our invited experts. With us today, joining us, we have Brendan Cormier. He is the Senior Design Curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum. He's a Canadian writer, curator and urban designer who's very fortunately now based in London for all of us Londoners. So welcome, Brendan. We also have Edmund King with us, the president of the AA, of course, the UK's #1 breakdown provider. And we're really excited to have Edmund with us because he really is an expert when it comes to understanding the automotive landscape. And finally, we have James Taylor, the UK General Manager for Zipcar in the UK, of course, the UK's leading car sharing network. So, gentlemen, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. How is everyone?
Very good, thank you.
Brilliant, brilliant. I can see you, Edmund. I'm sure I'll get this figured out so I can see you all at the same time in a minute. Edmund, let's kick this off together. I suppose my first question to you is, this is clearly all about why we fell in love with cars, and will this continue going forward? What is your favourite car, following on from the discussion that we just had, and why did you fall in love with it?
Yeah, I heard some of the last discussion, and many of the cars that were mentioned were some of my favourite cars. My first memory of a car, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, I lived in Norwich and for a while lived next door but one to Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus Cars, and became friendly with his son and daughters. So from a young age, I would see these Lotus Elans speeding past our driveway, and I became absolutely fascinated with cars from that stage. And Colin Chapman flew me to my first Grand Prix at Silverstone, and I met Graham Hill and people like that. So cars were always a part of me. And then my dad had a load. He worked for a French wine company and he thought he should have a French car. So he had the Citroën DS. And I'm from a family of 9. I've got 4 brothers and 4 sisters, and they're pictures of all of us cramped into a DS going on a family holiday to the south of France. You know, this was before everyone had a child seat or seat belts. It would be one row in the back and another row on top. So the DS, absolute brilliant car. I went through Minis, MGs, went through the family phase with the Volvos and the Mercedes, then into the kind of 911s, the Porsche 911, brilliant car. And now I've gone electric. So no, I love cars. They're still out there and they will be for some time.
Well, congratulations on taking the plunge and switching to electric. Can I ask which model?
Yes, it's probably the best electric car there is out there, and it's such a joy to drive. And I think Ginny referred to it in the last session. It's a Porsche Taycan. And if anyone says electric cars are boring, trust me, they really are not. They can be stylish, great to drive, and you know what? It's kind of odd in a way, though. I do slightly miss not going to fill up at the BP garage or something. It's kind of a bit perverse. I went into one the other day to buy a Sunday Times, And I found that I had to apologize to the guy in there that I hadn't been in there for a couple of months. And I felt a little bit guilty that I wasn't putting petrol into my car. So it's quite an odd feeling, but it is the future.
Well, I'm very, very glad that I'm going to hopefully have a bit of help then fighting the corner, because my background is I'm obviously here from electrifying.com, and we talk all things electric and trying to sort of educate everyone into it's quite a daunting world taking the plunge into electric, but we'll come on to that in a little bit. I think we should probably also have a quick chat with our other panelists. Brendan, I'd like to introduce you and find out what your sort of favorite car is and how you fell in love with it, so we can discuss whether or not this is going to continue in future generations.
Well, I mean, despite having curated an entire exhibition about cars, I have to make, I think, right up at the beginning, a guilty admission that I am not a driver at all. I don't have a driver's license. I've never owned a car. And so in one respect, that puts me kind of at the center of this discussion about the future of automobiles as one of those people. However, that in no way diminishes my interest in cars. And I have to say, my love for cars really centers around people's cars. So, you know, starting with the Model T to the Volkswagen to the Cinquecento, only because, you know, these are the cars that really made universal automobilization, or the world of cars as we know it, possible. And my wife, she's from Iran, and Iran had exactly the same story as everywhere else, but a little bit later in the 1970s with the introduction of the Paycon. And if you're familiar with the history of the Paycon, it's a modified Hillman Hunter. And it's so interesting just to see how these kinds of car cultures move around the world. And even though it's the same car as the one in the UK, it takes on a totally different significance in the popular imagination of people.
Brendan, this is absolutely brilliant that you don't have a driving license, because but I think it's a perfect demonstration how you can fall in love with a car for a completely different purpose. It's not necessarily about the performance or driving as fast as you can go. There are so many different elements to why we fall in love with cars. And again, hopefully that will set to continue. Let's bring James into the discussion and find out what his view is. What's the car that you fell in love with first, James, and why?
It's probably the first car I ever had, because I think, you know, just passing my driving test and been lucky enough to get a new car, and it was a Volkswagen Polo. And I think it's just because it represented at that age kind of freedom that, you know, I didn't have to be asking mum and dad for a lift anywhere. It suddenly I could go where I wanted. And you know, even now when I see a Volkswagen Polo, it kind of takes me back to that first time getting in the car and thinking, this is mine. So yeah, I think that's probably the one for me.
So here's an interesting, when you see a Volkswagen Polo and it reminds you, does it have to be the same model, the same spec? Is it any Volkswagen Polo? If there was an electric version, would you still have the same feeling?
Yeah, I think it's any really. And kind of lucky enough that we're at Zipcar, we actually have Volkswagen Polos in our fleet. So that's nothing to do with me, I have to say. That was we've been in the fleet for a long time, but it's not me kind of just getting vehicles there to fill my passion. But no, it is. It just takes you back. And anytime you see one of those cars, even if it's a different model, it just reminds you of that time.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant sort of start to this discussion. There are obviously so many different reasons why we all fall in love with cars. You know, it could be well, as Edmund explained, the noise of the Lotus outside his house as a young boy. It could be much more about the function of it, of course, just literally getting from A to B. It can be much more about the form and the design, and you don't need to drive it at all. So I think let's sort of go on to the next step of this and talk about how things could potentially change and why things are changing, because I think technology is obviously the key the defining factor here of why things are changing. And we're obviously looking at new powertrains. We're moving from the noisy internal combustion engine cars to hybrids to electric. And what does that mean to people when they see they're not silent, but we call them the sort of silent cars, I suppose, of the next generation. Edmund, how do you feel when you see your Porsche Taycan, well, you probably don't see it driving past, you're the one driving it, but you know, you turn on you don't even turn the key anymore, do you? You just get in the car. So actually it's a completely different experience altogether. But I think the most important thing of what we're all used to is you get into a noisy, you know, the sound of like a noisy V8 engine, V10, V12. That's what we loved maybe when we were growing up. That huge sound that you get. You're not going to get that when you get into your Porsche Taycan. So how does it make you feel when you pull away?
Yeah, I think that it's really interesting concept, because cars have been part of our culture for a long time. You know, my favorite book, Jack Kerouac, On the Road, one of my favorite films, The Graduate, with the Alpha in it, The Italian Job with the 4 Minis. And, you know, songs are part of our culture as well. Songs about cars, you know, Queen, etc. So part of our cultural heritage is around cars. And the one area, Nikki, that I will be totally honest, that I have struggled with the electric revolution, and it is actually missing that V6. And even though my Taycan, I actually paid extra to have the kind of artificial noise, which I know is sad, and you shouldn't do that. But even though I've done that, it sounds like a spaceship, not a V8. It's kind of ooh, ooh. And to drive, you know, it's like the 911. It's as good as the 911 to actually drive. I mean, it really is. But I do sometimes, I admit it, miss that noise. And if I could have, you know, I don't know, the noise of an Aston Martin in the Taycan, then without a doubt, it would be the best car in the world. But no, it is the future. And we did a survey of 20,000 AA members recently, and it's really, really interesting. 49% said they are considering an electric vehicle for their next car. Now, they won't all buy one, but they're certainly thinking about it. And, you know, on a serious point, with the government saying that they will outlaw or ban sales of new petrol and diesel cars by 2030, you know, that is only 9 years away. That is very, very radical. We will see more changes in the next 10 years in automotive than we have in the last 50. You know, the last 50. And Brendan, I saw your brilliant exhibition at the V&A, and some of the cultural and safety aspects you brought out there. But I think if you do that exhibition in 10 years' time, there will be far more changes in that automotive. So I actually think the future is really, really exciting. And people who say the future of the car or the love of the car is dead aren't really on this planet. You know, there might be in some urban areas where it's easier to car share or not have a car, and I've lived in those urban areas. But once you get out to Derby, Doncaster and Darlington, get out to the real world. Once you have kids, you need a car to put your buggy in the back, to put your nappies in the back. Once they're teenagers, you need to take them to the football matches, the ice skating that you can't always do in public transport. So the car has liberated people, liberated women in the 50s, the 60s, and it does enhance our lifestyle. So if I could get that V6 noise back, Nikki, I'd be a totally happy man.
Excellent. Well, to be honest, I think there was quite a lot of controversy around whether or not car manufacturers should put the sound of the original engine into an electric car. But if everyone starts saying that that's what they want, where there's a will, there is always a way. So maybe this is something that we're going to start seeing happening in the future, and bringing back the sound of the V6 that you love so much. So don't give up yet, Edmund. Your wish may be granted. Well, I think that was a really good introduction there of mentioning how so many cars have sort of been, I suppose, put into the history books through the iconic, whether it's films or magazines or or whatever. But Brendan, maybe you could talk us through some of the most popular cars that you saw at your exhibition, and also the most futuristic cars that were getting attention.
Well, there are two cars that we featured in the exhibition that one speaks to pop culture, which is of course the Ford Mustang and Bullet, and then about 10 years earlier, a concept car from GM called the Firebird, which is one of 4 concept cars that they put out at that period. And both of them speak to a kind of, well, what I wanted to say, I mean, if I could add a little bit of historical context to this whole conversation.
I can't
in terms of thinking about the future of the car, I mean, the car really has always, since its beginning, led 2 parallel lives. So the first is, we get the invention of the car, and whenever you invent something new, the first question is, well, what are we going to use it for? And the car was not invented to drive your kids to football practice. I'm still getting used to different lingo. But in fact, was really a thing for the elite or those who had money to race. And then it became really about showing your personality. But what was the most successful thing for marketing cars since the very beginning has been 2 things. One, it's performance, its speed, that thrill of being behind the wheel, and the other is that what James mentioned earlier, that sense of freedom. And you see that as far back as 1900, when Michelin, the tire company, put out the very first Michelin guide, saying, you know what you can do with this car? You can get out of town and you can explore the world. The car transforms you into that. The second life of the car is, of course, this other kind of more mundane idea about, practicality, getting to work, buying your groceries, and all that. And so this is a long-winded way of me just saying the future of the car, for me personally, I think, is that first element, that thrill, that speed, that sense of exploration, that will never go away. And that's what the car has always done really, really well. And that second aspect, the day-to-day aspect, now there are just so many alternatives or ways you can go about doing that, that's the one that's being called into question, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's a really good sort of summary of what we've seen over the past. And actually, I think it really nicely links into James. And maybe he can share a little bit of information on how things are looking in the car sharing world, because, the next generation, there is talk that not many of them, even if any of them, will solely outright own a car, because car sharing is going to be the eco way forward. James, what trends can you share with us at the moment? And also, I think, linking it back to what we're going to see in 2030, when, of course, those new internal combustion engine sales will end, and how that's going to affect the car sharing industry.
Yeah, I think, broadly speaking, I think that the car sharing sector is doing really well. We're growing year on year. I suppose particularly to Brendan's point, that people want that freedom still, but don't necessarily want the hassle and the cost associated with owning a car. And you get all that same thrill of driving, you get the same ability to go where you want to go, but you don't have all the other things that go with it if you own a car. So we're seeing lots more people switching to us, and particularly during the pandemic, there's people, I suppose, kind of moved a bit away from public transport. There was that kind of nervousness around being in a shared space and have been able to control your own environment. I think we saw a lot of people come into car sharing through that period. That's probably introduced people to car sharing for the first time. And I think also we make, certain types of vehicles, particularly we talk about EVs just now, for many people, the cost of owning an electric vehicle is prohibitive. They can't access an EV. We make that possible. We've got 325 e-Golfs in our fleet now. And we've seen over 65,000 members have driven an EV with us. That's, if you consider the number of EVs in the UK as a whole, that's a significant number of people that we're introducing to electric vehicles. And I think that's more how you'll see, car sharing grow. And again, to Brendan's point, all the other various modes of transport that are available as well, particularly in urban areas, recognizing that a lot of the development so far has been in urban locations, the likes of e-scooters and dockless bikes and all those kind of things that give you other options. But there will always be a need for a car. There'll always be certain trips where it's just more it's easier, you know, if you moving heavy items, lot of goods to move, if there's a lot of people with, there are certain trips you'd always need a car, and I think that's where car sharing has a really vital role to play in providing people access to that car without the need to own it.
So, I mean, that's a really interesting point, but I think obviously, James, you're mentioning there, it's all about practicalities. It's about, you need a car, you need it to get from A to B, you want it to cost you the least amount of money and be the least faff involved, so you don't have to worry about things like insurance or servicing or MOTs. But doesn't that take away that love and that romance? The reason that people fall in love with their cars is because they're sitting outside their house and they go out and polish it every day. They go out and tinker with their car. Things go wrong, but they love it so much. They go on a journey together, and that doesn't matter if it's your first car, a Nissan Micra, or what you're driving today. I think there's something to be said. A car can become a part of the family. There's always the old Land Rover Defender that was always brought up as one of the favorites. And I think that's a kind of car that literally can be in a family for decades after decade. And you really build a relationship with that car. Whereas when you have car sharing, is that the end of the relationship that we currently have with our cars at the moment? Because now you're sharing it with someone else, you're getting a different model, you're jumping in this one, you're jumping in that one, you're leaving it here, you're leaving it there. Oh, whoopsie, I scratched it. I scratched the wheel on the curb. Oh, well, never mind. It's not my problem. Off I go. That sort of love and affection that we have potentially could disappear. Edmund, I see you nodding your head there.
Well, yeah, we actually did a survey of 20,000 drivers, and 63% say they would be lost without their car. And interestingly, it was more women. 70% of women said they'd be lost. 20%, Nikki, had actually named their car. They'd given their car a name. So it was part of the family. And despite all we hear pre-lockdown about cones, congestion and chaos, 2/3 still enjoyed driving. So there was still that enjoyment of driving. So I think in terms of car ownership, I think the way we own cars can change, but it's not all about ownership or sharing. There's perhaps a middle ground. And what we're finding is more people are actually leasing cars, and particularly like electric cars. So if people are worried about the life of the battery and what will happen, and they don't want to invest their own money in it, at the AA, we do something called Smart Lease. You can get a little Vauxhall Corsa electric for about £11 a day. And that includes everything, though, your insurance, your servicing, and the cost of the car. So all you have to do is literally plug it in. And that takes away, it can still feel like your own car. So getting to that point, you can have your own radio station set, you can have your own junk in the boot of the car, but it is still a new car, and you've got that kind of reassurance that if anything goes wrong, you can send it back. I mean, car sharing and culture, I think, is really interesting. When I was a teenager, I used to hitchhike a lot because I lived outside Chipping Norton, and the nearest towns were Banbury or Oxford, and there was only a bus, once a day. And hitchhiking gave me freedom back then. And my mother was an English teacher around there, and if she saw teenagers hitchhiking, she would give them a lift because she'd think it might be Edmund or Stephen or Dominic or Francis or Conrad or one of my many, many brothers. And unfortunately, that kind of Jack Kerouac history and freedom from hitchhiking is gone. The only person who hitchhikes now is Simon Calder, the Independent's travel expert, who's often on BBC talking about it. And Simon still hitchhikes, but he's about the only person I do. And in a way, I kind of miss that, because hitchhiking was the perfect way of car sharing. It really was making use, and it was fun, if a bit risky, a bit weird. But so yeah, the way we drive cars, the way we own cars is changing. car sharing is interesting. We did a study in Glasgow a few years ago, and we asked people, would they like to car share? And they all said, yeah, it's a brilliant idea. We'd love to car share. And then when we set up a pilot, what came out of it from some people was what we called a nymph syndrome. And what that was drivers saying, not in my front seat. You know, their front seat was for them so that they could set the radio, set the temperature. And what we found, the people who wanted to share weren't other car users. They were actually people coming from public transport to share the cars. So in effect, it didn't really take any cars off the road. But I do accept some of that's changing. But don't underestimate the demand for young drivers learning to drive. You know, there are still 1.6 million tests each year. And actually, over the last 10 years, it has been pretty static. And due to the pandemic, we've got a pent-up demand at the AA driving schools of about 26,000 pupils who just can't wait to get lessons restarted, which hopefully will be on the 12th of April. So there's still a heck of a demand from young people to learn to drive.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, you know, in a way, this suddenly car sharing gives access to those that potentially couldn't afford to buy a car. And wouldn't have necessarily considered even bothering to get a test, because once they had a test, they knew they wouldn't be able to buy a car or upkeep the car. This is a massively accessible way to suddenly be able to drive. And also, on one sense, I know we've said that maybe that the relationship is going to be different through car sharing. However, maybe it will give people the opportunity to actually learn about cars and different models of cars and what cars they like, what cars they don't like, and actually suddenly appreciate the different availability of models and options a lot more than perhaps they just get their one car. They have it for 10 years or 20 years, however long, and then they change, you know, whereas this actually potentially could open up people's eyes to the industry even more so. And then, as you say, you've got people that are moving from public transport to cars. So again, you're opening it up to an additional channel, but you can't beat obviously the huge benefit. Forget the love of cars, forget what relationship and how that's going to change. Obviously the benefit to the environment is just going to be huge, you know, being able to take cars off the roads that are just sitting there doing nothing day in, day out, and suddenly maximizing the potential of these cars is just huge.
Can I make just one more point about the changing nature of the personal relationship to cars?
Please do, button at any point.
Well, it's just that, I mean, I think the relationship to cars has changed not just because of car sharing and not just because of electrification, but for a few other reasons we need to take into account. One is that, you know, since the 1920s and really peaking in the 50s and 60s, the car was really one of the most important purchases you had to express your personality. Yeah? So that was one of the brilliant things that General Motors kind of figured out in the 1920s. They looked at the fashion system and they said, why can't our cars actually be like our clothes as expressions of who we are? And then what's changed in the last 10, 20 years, of course, is that expressions of who we are has moved from physical space. You know, physical space still exists, but we have now so many tools for expressing our identity online. So, you know, those three major things, your house, your car, your clothes, those do express your personality, but you have other ways of expressing that. And that's primarily through experience. And that's, you know, exactly why we see, you know, such a boom in the car industry in terms of kind of rented experiences. You know, you can rent a McLaren, get a subscription and race it 6 times a year. And that's fine. You don't need to own the McLaren because you can snap pictures of that McLaren and put it online.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it comes back a bit, that point about trying different cars. One of the things about electric cars that's put some people off is that one journey they do to the Lake District every year, or that one trip to Cornwall, and they say, well, I haven't got the range, you know, and that really is a myth, because what you could do, and if you did want the people carrier for that longer journey, then you could rent one from Zip Cars for that one journey. But for the rest of your journeys, electric vehicle would be fine. So I think I think you're right to question that kind of utility, and you don't need to have one car for everything. There are other options that can make it more flexible.
Yeah, and just I don't even think that's just a question of EVs in terms of that people think they have their car for that one trip that they do of 300 miles a year. We know that certainly in cities that cars remain parked for, I think it's 96% of the time, something incredible stat like that just shows if we use the assets in a different way, sharing is one of the ways that we can reduce the number of vehicles on our roads and address the air quality, the congestion challenges, while still giving people the freedom to get to where they want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about the qualities that people are going to look for in cars? Again, looking sort of previously into the past, the things that we always fell in love with was the noise, the sounds, that kind of the emotive feelings. Do you think now, obviously, technology is at the core of a lot of the cars that are coming onto the market? Is this now going to be the focus of everyone when they fall in love with their car? But are we going to treat it more like we love our iPhones and we want to upgrade our iPhones? I don't want to have a Nokia anymore. I want an iPhone. Therefore, we're going to see that trend when it comes to falling in love with cars again.
If I could start on that, the one thing that has actually changed in the last 20 years has been about the safety of cars. And what changed that was the Euro NCAP crash testing program that was introduced about 20 years ago. Up until that point, all cars met general safety criteria, but you didn't really know if car A was better than car B. So that crash test program was started then, and it was pretty radical. The car industry was totally opposed to it at the time. How can you crash cars faster than the regulated way? And they were opposed to it. And we were fully involved at the time. And I remember seeing that first Rover 100 or Mini Metro being crashed. And it was absolute heartbreaking to see the whole front of the car and the steering wheel crushed together like this. And that had a dramatic effect. Police forces who used those cars said we won't use them. Childminders said they wouldn't. And even though the industry was opposed at the beginning, what it actually did, it led to a catalyst of change and has improved car safety. I think Renault was one of the first that broke ranks and said our car can get 5-star Euro NCAP, and then others did. And that one program helped to change consumer attitudes towards safety, and more, particularly for family cars, more people would say if I'm getting a family car or if I'm getting a car for my teenager, it must be 5-star NCAP. So I think that has been a good thing that's changed around safety, and now it's almost accepted because most cars get 5-star. So then I think, Nikki, your point does come on. Does it come to the technology? But one of the ironies here is in many of the new cars, they've got brilliant technology, but a lot of the drivers don't actually realize what the technology is or what it can do. Yes, you get your Tesla fanatics and they want downloads as soon as they can. And when our patrols go out to a McLaren, they don't use a spanner, they use a laptop and they have to update it. It's a different world. And the technology is good and it will make our cars safer. But I do think we've got a bit of an education system of actually pointing out to drivers what that technology does and equally what it doesn't do. It doesn't always make you safe, which some people think it does. So yeah, our aspirations are changing.
Yeah, no, that's very true. I think, it's particularly with autonomy obviously coming in more and more, there is definitely an education that has to be done, because you want to be making sure that everyone uses that in the right way. But, I appreciate what you're saying is that a lot of people don't know what their cars are capable of. But wouldn't you say that that's always been the case? There are people that are into their cars and they know absolutely everything about it. And there are people that are just using it to get from A to B, and that will always exist. They're
but cars are so much more difficult. My first Mini Traveller cost £45, and I could change the brakes, I could change the spark plugs, I somehow welded new sills on it. If I look in the engine, there's nothing in the front of my car because it's electric. But even my last car, hybrid car, the only thing I could do on that car was put air in the tires and water in the windscreen washer and maybe a bit of oil in that car. I couldn't do anything else. And in a way, there is a bit of that lost art, because I'm older than all you guys, and people of our generation, we would work on our cars. You would do that basic maintenance on your old Mini and things, and some of those mechanical skills have been lost, and we find that at the AA in terms of recruiting patrols and mechanics. That market is much smaller now, whereas 20-30 years ago far more people could change spark plugs and whatever. But I guess that's technology.
Well, exactly. Also, sorry.
I just wanted to add quickly onto that, really quickly, just that there's this great Dutch designer named Bas van Abel, and over the last 10 years, he's been leading a campaign about the ability to repair things. And his critique has been traditionally at computers and iPhones, for instance. But he has this line that says, if you can't repair it, you don't really own it. And that goes back to, Nikki, what you were saying about personal relationships to cars. That one of the greatest things about the car has been our ability to kind of tinker with it, is what you said. And increasingly with the computerization of cars, that tinkering becomes much more difficult. So there's a psychological element in our ability to repair cars that also divorces us from them slightly more.
But I think also that's where technology can help in terms of the personalization, particularly from a car sharing perspective. So that, thinking ahead to a time where when I get into whatever car I get into, it knows my preferences. So it knows my favorite radio station. It knows the temperature that I like the seat to be heated to. So it still feels like my car, even though it's a shared car. And that's where I think we can still build that relationship. Maybe it's the connection to Zipcar as a brand and the access that we give to vehicles that will come through that technology. But I think there's still scope there to feel that connection.
Now, in a moment, sorry, I was just going to say, we've actually got Ewan West. He is part of the discussion. He's been listening to us chatting. He is 18 years old and he's been fixing cars since he was 10 years old. So in a moment, he's going to join us. So it'll be great to get his thoughts from the younger generation that we still wish we were part of. But I think again, it's just really interesting what everyone was just saying then about how, yes, the relationship with technology is changing, and actually it doesn't really matter what powertrain it is. It's nothing about having an electric car. This is happening with internal combustion engine cars as well. You can't sort of tinker around with them in the same way that you could previously. Although I was having a chat with a colleague here at Electrifying, and we were just saying, I was like, what's my 2-year-old son going to do? He's 2, and I'm really worried because I come from a generation of petrol heads. It can't stop at me. He has to be into his cars and a petrol head. So I was thinking, like, what is he going to do? And I've had reassurance that I think the next generation will have their laptops out, and it's all going to be about tuning the sound of the car, the fake sound of the car, and the efficiency of the car, and trying to get your electric car as efficient as possible. So hopefully it won't end yet, but hopefully Ewan is going to join us any second now. Oh, we'll carry on. Oh, there he is. Yes.
Yeah, hi.
Ewan, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thanks. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about your experience and your love of cars.
Well, it all probably started back when I was even younger than 10, must have been 5 years old or something, playing Need for Speed Underground on my old family PC with like a CRTV monitor. Even then, I'm a bit young for a CRTV monitor, but that's where it all started, and that's where I kind of found this. I kind of loved this whole. I think it was sex spec, is the kind of style of cars that were featured in that game. And so the whole modifying a car visually really appeals to me, and then the performance as well. I've never done it, a bit of misunderstanding. I've never done it. It's something that I really want to do, and it's something that I hope to do soon now that I can drive and I've got a wee bit of money saved up to buy a car. It's now just COVID's restricted me from buying a car.
Have you got
yeah, I love cars. Pardon, I got cut off a wee bit there.
Sorry, what car do you have your eye on?
It's like, I have a short list. The biggest impediment to buying a car as a young driver is the cost of insurance, and then even getting insurance in the first place.
Okay, let's make this a two-pronged question. Which car, if you didn't have to think about insurance, would you like to buy?
I have absolutely no idea. I really like Suzuki Cappuccinos. A kind of tiny, it's a Japanese K sports car. So yeah, it's a tiny, I think it's 0.69 liter engine, 3-cylinder turbocharged roadster. I really like the look of it. It looks really fun. But there's not many in the UK, which is the problem. Most of all, I live in Scotland, and the used car market here is really, really small. So buying a car here is just a bit awkward. I find, especially as enthusiasts, trying to find the right car.
It's been tricky. And in terms of sort of technology, is that something that's important to you when you're looking at cars? Do you think you'll be able to, I suppose, in future years, when you're looking at buying cars, is that something that's going to be a driving force behind your choice and decision?
I mean, possibly, yeah. I'd rather drive like a more old-fashioned car with as little technology as possible to try and get the purest driving experience possible. But as a computer science student, integrating technology to cars is something that does really interest me as well. It's not something I personally want, but it's something that I definitely think is a good thing. And it's like, there was an example, I saw a video on YouTube a few days ago of this person who made his own free valve kind of technology for his Mazda MX-5, inspired by the technology Koenigsegg's developing, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Do any of our experts want to ask you anything before we say goodbye?
I mean, Ewan, in terms of the insurance, I've got teenage sons, and the only way you can get insurance at your age is to have a black box in the car. And, it does keep an eye on you and the way you drive. And as long as you don't speed or brake or accelerate too much, you get a better premium. But what we find that for any new drivers, for the first couple of years in particular, if you have that kind of insurance, then you build up a no claims bonus, and then it drops quite considerably. And that certainly happened to my son. So I'm afraid you're going to have to allow Big Brother to follow you around Scotland for the first couple of years to bring those costs down. Otherwise, your cost of insurance would be more than the cost of the car, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's very much the case.
Good luck. Keep it up. And when you want a job, come and join us at the AA. We need people like you who are interested in cars and technology. So good to hear from you, Ewan.
Ewan, good luck. How do you feel about Big Brother watching you when you first get past your driving test?
I mean, I don't like it because I don't know, really, I don't know what would your hard braking, hard accelerating, how much that entails, how hard that is, if that makes sense. So I'm like scared that you might be driving on that at some point on the limit there, and then not know if that's going to put it up or put it down. But I guess it's like, it's nothing that isn't already happening. We already know, like with your phone, it's already tracking you, isn't it? So it's nothing new there. I mean, I personally don't like it. I would probably go for an insurance policy without one if I could.
I reckon you take the insurance policy with the black box. The money that you save, you go and race on a test track.
Yeah,
that's not
good
a bad
advice.
idea. That's not a bad idea. I never thought of that.
There you are. Well, Ewan, thank you so much for joining us. We've only got about 5 minutes left of our discussion, so I better get back on topic. But it was brilliant to hear Ewan's thoughts there and inject a bit of young blood into our chat. So we've got about 5 minutes left before we finish off this topic. I feel like we have not really come to any form of conclusion yet. Will the love of cars continue? Well, I feel like, yes, it will, but it's going to change. Brendan, what do you think we need to do to ensure that our next generation are still as passionate about the automotive world that we've seen in previous years?
Oh gosh, nobody's ever asked me that question before, so I'm caught a little off guard. But I think, one of those things is what I just mentioned about, thinking about the idea of that personal relationship to the car and your ability to, be able to tinker and repair, I think is really actually huge. So whether that is kind of along what Edmund was saying is, we're all just going to have to become more computer literate in order to continue that kind of relationship, or whether it goes with certain legislation actually, which mandates that you should be able to repair your own car, which is actually happening in other domains. So that might be interesting to follow. Otherwise, I'm actually quite happy with the idea of the car going kind of two ways. One way being, from a utility perspective, much more towards shared, electric, and better for the environment. And exactly what you said, Nikki, saving a little bit of your money to be able to go out to the track and have a good time, and where the car really becomes about hobby and less about day-to-day kind of drudgery and commutes and things like that.
And we're relying on you as well to host and curate fantastic events. Can you do another car event at the V&A anytime soon?
That would be great. Yeah.
I mean, one thing there, Nikki, though, that does link what Brendan was saying and other things about if you can't tinker with the car. I mean, you can tinker in a different way now. So you can tinker online. So, my app here, I can set the temperature of my car outside. I can check my tire pressures. I can see how much it's charged, and it was quite amazing on those snowy, wintry days that we had a month or so ago. I'd inadvertently set my car to be ready for me to drive at 8 a.m. And I'd look out the window and all these other cars were totally frosted over and had snow on the bonnet. And I'm thinking, what's happened to my car? There was no snow on the top. There were no iced windows. And inadvertently, I'd used the technology not very well. I needed someone like Ewan to teach me how to use the app. So in a way, I guess my point is, Brendan, people will still toy with their cars, play with their cars, but it will be more in a digital nature rather than a physical nature. Yeah. But that will still help them to engage. There are car forums I've found for the Porsche Taycan and loads of Americans, Canadians on them, and you actually get really useful information. I'm sounding like an anorak now, but you get really useful information from around the world. And I've learned loads of things from other drivers that I didn't know my car could do. So the way we relate to our cars is changing because of that technology.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's almost like sort of you're gamifying car ownership in a way, isn't it? And that is what we love. That's what the younger generation love, apparently. Anyway, James, how do you think car sharing is going to help the next generation fall in love with cars?
I think there's a number of ways. I think just one, making it easy to access a car. For somebody like you and insurance is prohibitive at the minute. We cover that with car sharing, so that makes that more accessible. I think the range of vehicles, particularly around EVs, I think the sector's doing a huge amount to speed up that adoption of EVs that will make it more accessible for people, give them a chance to drive an EV for the first time, and different EVs. So I think you start to build some of that passion for the car because of the different type of cars that you can take for your trip. So whether it is a little EV to run around the city with, or a bigger EV to kind of drive away for the weekend, all those different types of things that I think it's finding the right car for the particular trip that you're taking. And I think that's where car sharing has a massive role to play, to keeping the fun of driving and the enjoyment of driving, but in a more kind of sustainable and environmentally conscious way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that's a great way to finish, because that is ultimately at the heart of the automotive world and the big change that we're experiencing right now. The environment is now coming first when it comes to transport. So things like car sharing and driving electric is going to be out, and it already is at the forefront of that. So I think to sort of briefly summarize, fingers crossed, the end of the love affair is not over yet. In fact, it's just changing, and our relationship with cars is just going to take a slightly different avenue. We'll be using technology to our advantage to help build a relationship with our cars. Perhaps we won't be tinkering with them in the same way that we always have done, but that doesn't mean that it won't stop. And actually with technology, we'll be able to do it on the go, while we're out and about as well, forming that relationship with cars. And then of course, with car sharing, it suddenly opens up the market to a lot more people. It will give people the opportunity to experience lots of different cars. So again, building relationships with models that they wouldn't have necessarily been sort of had the access to drive. And then we'll still have things like, films with iconic cars in, we'll have race experiences, we'll have events to go to. So we can still build our relationships with cars away from the road. So that was just a very quick summary, which leads me just to say a massive thank you to our experts for joining us. Edmund King, James Taylor, Brendan Cormier. Thank you both. Thank all three of you for joining us, and also Ewan for coming on for a few minutes as well. Thank you for everyone else for joining the Tortoise Future of Car Summit and this session. Now, just a reminder to everyone that if you're not a member of Tortoise yet, then you can actually take a free trial. Ellen, who has been monitoring all the chat conversation, will post a link in the chat, so do make the most of that. And then we're going to have a short break. Now, after the break, we will have Giles. He's going to be taking over for the final editorial debrief, and we'll have a bit of a reflection on today's conversation. So thanks once again, and we'll hopefully leave you with a few thoughts to ponder. Thanks very much.